Welcome back to Why We Are Christians and my interview with Kent Philpott, pastor, teacher, author, and producer of this show. Kent, you've just told us how you became a Christian and a little bit about your life up till then. We left off with you talking about preaching, your opportunity to preach a couple of times. Did you feel that that was a call on your life from God? Tell us a little bit about how you got into the ministry.
Early on, my fascination was psychology. Being in the military, I went to a lot of schools, got a lot of credits. I could have graduated in cultural anthropology, sociology, psychology. Psychology was most interesting because I knew I was weird. I've always been neurotic.
You've always been what?
Neurotic.
Oh, gotcha.
Neurotic.
Okay.
My mother was, and I learned that from her. And I've had, frankly, I've had to fight that all my life. I might as well admit it. If you know me very well, you know that I'm, have a problem or two sometimes with stress. But I was going to be a school psychologist. That's what I was going to do.
Okay.
Going to be a school psychologist. I graduated from Sacramento State finally. I went into a master's degree in counseling, what you had to do to become a school psychologist. I'd finished my classwork and I was in the observed counseling part of the degree program. And I was dead ahead, straight going for school psychology, when all of a sudden, and it was sort of snuck up on me, but I realized, I remember what happened. I realized that as a counselor, school counselor, I was never going to be able to talk to any high school kid about Jesus. I had a dead-on atheist as major professor. He was tough, and he didn't like my Christianity. He kind of made things tough for me all the way through the program. But at any rate, I didn't finish the observed part of it. I left, and I went into the ministry. I went and told Pastor Lewis that I felt called into the ministry. I don't know that it was a feeling. It was more of a conviction that although being a school psychologist was fine, it lacked the meaning for me.
Okay, all right.
It didn't have enough substance. So the day I got out of the Air Force, which was in August of 1965, I moved in that same day into Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary in Mill Valley, California, with wife Bobby and kids Dory and Grace. I had applied. The church at Fairfield licensed me, which was required at that point. To get into the seminary, you had to be licensed. You had to prove your conversion experience.
Wow.
You had to write papers. It was really interesting. But so there I was, and I moved into 10A Judson Lane at the seminary and started a 4-year master's program, which I did in 3 years, called the Master of Divinity.
Wow.
And there I was, and my first job was a psych tech at Ross Hospital, the mental ward.
Oh my.
And so there I was because of my background.
Sure.
And so I did that, and then moved on from there after that hospital closed, and sold shoes at J.C. Penney's in Corte Madera.
Oh, wow.
Fitting these little kids' tennis shoes on these little kids' feet. Which I loved doing that, by the way.
You did? Oh,
I loved selling
you.
shoes.
Good for you. And
it
so
was terrific.
You sold shoes for a while, and during this time you were going to seminary. Were you able to preach anywhere during that time?
One of the dreams that seminary students have was to pastor a church, and so I did. It was 1966, and I was invited to go to this little country church in Byron, California, out by Tracy, between Brentwood and Tracy. And there was this Excelsior Baptist Church. And they called me as the pastor. And I was there for 2.5 years. And at first, my salary was $20 a week. But the deacons got mad at me about halfway through and reduced my salary to $10 a week. It was 75 miles one way, and I would go back and forth.
Wow.
I was up there every Saturday and Sunday, Reached out to the migrant workers, got attacked by dogs set on us.
Oh,
2 German shepherds, David Hoyt and I.
oh boy, the
And
life
it
of
was
a
quite
pastor.
a thing. And there was a juvenile hall in Byron. And every other Sunday we got the whole group coming. I didn't know it, but the folks at the church didn't like that.
Ah,
They wanted it for them,
gotcha.
not for these migrant workers and for these kids. And that's when I got my salary reduced, cut in half. It was very awful. It wasn't.
Really changed your style of living, right?
But it gave me a chance to preach twice a week.
Uh-huh.
And it was very busy, selling shoes. Seminary full time, I took the maximum number of units.
Wow.
I had the GI Bill, but the GI Bill was only going to last me a little over 3 years.
So that's why you were bound and determined
I
to
had
do
to
it
get
in
out
3
of there
years.
as quick as I could. So I
Wow.
went to every summer school, everything they had I took to get out of there in 3 years.
That's incredible, Kent. So, okay, so preparing for this interview, you've told me a bit about your story in the late 60s, and I'm dying to get to that part. So let's talk about what you were doing in the late 60s. Where were you still living in Mill Valley, and how did you get to downtown, down in San Francisco at that time?
Something very unusual happened to me. I've only had this happen to me 2, perhaps 3 times in my life. It was on a Wednesday night in February of 1967. I was driving home, it had to have been around 9:30, driving home from Corte Madera. I was just coming to Seminary Drive in Mill Valley to turn off. I was listening to the radio. I was listening to Scott McKenzie sing, "When you come to San Francisco, wear a flower in your hair." I know that sounds strange.
These were the hippie days, right?
Yes. I knew about the hippies, but anyway, I'm listening to this song, and I don't have the words to really say it, but I was convinced that God told me to go to the hippies in San Francisco.
That very night or that
No,
very day?
That's all, was just go to the
Okay.
hippies in San Francisco.
Okay.
I did the very next night, Thursday night, again after I got off work selling shoes. Late at night, I get there, and I'm trying to look cool. I've got my old military field jacket on, I got my brogans on, I don't know what else, and it's cold, it's a little bit rainy, and nobody's on Haight Street, nobody. So I'm up on Waller, one street up, and I'm walking down, and I see some lights down here on the right-hand side, and it's the Hamilton Methodist Church. And I looked in there, the windows were incredibly dirty, and I look in there, and I'm trying to see what's going on. Now, this is about 10 o'clock at night now. And a guy, he comes up, it startled me. He tapped me on the shoulder, some hippie guy, and all he said to me was, "You want to learn about religion?"
Huh.
And I said, "Okay." So I walk with him down Waller Street toward Masonic, and we come to a big Victorian house on the opposite side from Hamilton Methodist Church. He knocks on the door, and a woman comes to the door, young hippie woman. Found out that it was a house of lesbians.
Okay.
But he wanted me to meet a guy who lived under the big staircase.
Ah.
Had this little room named David Hoyt. He turned out to have been the chief devotee of the Hare Krishna temple.
Wow.
David was, in the book that we have, Memoirs of a Jesus Freak, and the Jesus film, Jesus Revolution, David had gotten out of federal prison. He had been running drugs from Mexico into the United States with the Mexican gang. His nickname was Buzzard, and tattooed Buzzard right here. And on his BSA, his motorcycle, and he got popped. And at age 19, he got sent to the federal penitentiary at Lompoc.
Oh boy.
While there, he became a spiritual guru. The guy has a very powerful personality, and he learned so much about Eastern religion. When he got released. He was convicted under the Mann Act, what's called the Mann Act, which had to do with your age and what your sentence looked like. So he only did 2 years. And so here he is. He comes to the Hare Krishna Temple, run by Swami Bhaktivedanta of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he is so dedicated, he becomes the chief devotee. So we started a Bible study there.
Wait, now, they were open to starting a Bible study at the Krishna temple?
Well, this started in where David was living.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And
But-
David was open to that.
Yeah, he invited me. Nobody else came but just he and I. We'd get in this little closet,
Okay.
basically a big closet, utility closet. It's where he lived. We'd drink tea, and I'd do a Bible study.
Ah.
But then we did this every week for a few months. Then he took up residence in the temple himself on Frederick Street, just off of Stanyon,
Okay.
right by Kezar Stadium.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so it's now a laundry, by the way, it's a laundry. But in the basement, that's where he lived. And so we moved the Bible study there, but not before I got permission from the Swami. And I had to go talk to Swami Bhaktivedanta, this guy, bald head. He was an old guy, but he had pictures of Catholic-oriented pictures of Jesus around the temple in various places. And he let me do it. He let me do it. By the way, I want to say a thing about David Hoyt. David Hoyt has a larger picture in this whole thing than you might imagine. He and Bob Sutherland, who was his name, was the leading Buddhist priest. David Hoyt and Bob Sutherland and 2 other people formed what was called the Board of the Summer of Love, 1967. David Hoyt was responsible, one of the main people responsible, for bringing all those kids to San Francisco.
So this was the summer of love that you were involved in.
Right. I started in February 1967. So we started the Bible study at this house, moved it to the basement of the temple. The Swami made me go to the kirtans. Before I could do the Bible study was at the end of the kirtan.
What is a kirtan?
A worship service. They
gotcha.
did 3 songs. I'll give you one. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna. Go, and then another one.
I remember hearing that song in the airport in the 70s.
Yeah. And then another one called Gopala, Gopala, Devakinandana, Gopala.
Wow, you still remember them.
I still know them. And I would listen to these. And the room is packed with kids, packed with hippie kids. And then after the kirtan, we'd go downstairs and I'd lead a Bible study.
Now, how many people were involved at that point?
I don't know, there was maybe
Handful?
maybe there was 150 kids that came to the kirtan, but down the basement was only about maybe a dozen of us.
Okay.
Then one Saturday morning, I got a call from David. He said, "Come and get me." And I drove in fairly early Saturday morning, and I passed. On Frederick, there were fire engines, and there were hoses snaked into the temple. And so I walked in, parked my car up by Kezar, walked back, my 64 Ford Blue station wagon, and I saw on the walls letters probably about 6 inches high, Christian slogans, Jesus is Lord, Jesus loves you, various things that were painted. David Hoyt had painted those. What happened was, during the night, there was a fire. David was so religious, he had built a separate altar in his room in the basement. I don't know if he left the candles going or not, but the altar caught fire, drove him out of there. And David was busy trying, now that the fire was out, gathering his stuff up, bringing it upstairs. And I got there and met David, and we started carting his stuff out to the car. And one thing, I almost didn't survive it. The last trip David took out to the car, and I was just coming out. I was coming up by the door, and 2 of the devotees thought that I caused all of this.
Uh-oh.
They rushed at me and pinned me up against the wall. I was off the ground, and they were choking me.
Oh my.
And if it hadn't been for a San Francisco fire department guy came and knocked those guys down, I fell to the floor, fell to my knees, gasping for breath, stood up. The fireman's trying to check on me, and I ran out, ran to the car, got in the car, and David moved in with us at 10A Judson Lane.
So tell me about the slogans that were written on the wall. Had David been converted at that point, or how did those slogans get there?
Somehow, David was converted. He told me, I haven't actually thought of this, Stephanie, in a long time. He told me he had a dream, that he woke up after this dream. He said that there was a vast horde of people, apparent from their skin color and their dress and their language, people from all over the world. And he said, all of a sudden, he said, Jesus appeared in the sky, and people began to rise up to meet him in the air.
Wow.
And he said, and I looked down, and my feet were on the ground.
Oh.
I wasn't going up. Version came probably in May, and he lived with me. He still dressed in saffron, made chapatis, this special bread they made, and he was a long, slow transition. He knew, but he devoured the Bible. He would go up to the seminary and sit in on classes, and here was this weird guy. I mean, you don't know, David and I are still very close friends. We talk to each other frequently. We're just publishing a new book that he and I authored called Two Brothers in Hate. David's personality was very strong. But we started right away doing what I like to call direct personal evangelism on Haight Street. On Haight Street. We would spend days there, as much as I could. As much as I could, we were there.
Now, were you still working at JCPenney's?
I was still
and you were
doing that and still
going
pastoring the church.
Oh, wow.
Going
and
to seminary.
Going to seminary. Okay.
And every time we had a chance, because it was extremely fruitful.
In terms of this personal...
The people, what happened was, these kids were coming, to find something, find whatever it is they were looking for. And then when they came there, they didn't find it. I was walking down Haight Street toward Masonic one day. Early on, I was very shy. I didn't really know what to do. And this may have happened before David started going with us. As I remember now, he didn't start coming with me for a while. He had a long period. He didn't know much about anything. He didn't know Genesis from Revelation. He didn't know who Jesus. He didn't know. So this was before really David got started with me.
Okay.
I was walking down the street and I saw a kid with a green suitcase sitting on the curb, hands on his head, and he had come to the Haight-Ashbury with a flower in his head. He wanted out.
He wanted out of the
He wanted
Haight-Ashbury?
home. And started a typical pattern. I would look for these kids who were obviously not happy to be there, but they'd run away from home, sometimes burnt bridges, sometimes they had places to go back to, sometimes they didn't have any place to go back to. But this kid, we put him on a Greyhound bus. I put a lot of people on Greyhound buses.
Sending them back to where they
Back to their homes. I'd call up their parents, and they would Western Union me money. I didn't have any money most of the time.
Right.
And so that's kind of how it went. And I got up to the point where I would hand out little gospel tracts or New Testaments. I got some people to help me, part of the little Southern Baptist Association I was with, along with the professor of missions and evangelism at Golden Gate, Dr. Francis DeBose, and the missionary, Joe Smith. They would provide me with materials. And many of these people had burned bridges. They had no place to go back to. And that's why we started our Christian houses.
Oh, wow.
Christian houses, which was one of the phenomenons of the Jesus People movement. An awakening is something that happens very similarly all across the country pretty much at the same time. sometimes people say, well, you know, you and Hoyt you started things in San Francisco. I disagree with that because I saw that the Holy Spirit of God, because I made a number of trips back and forth across the country during the next few years. And I saw the same things develop in all kinds of different cities and towns across the country as was happening in San Francisco. All of a sudden, we found numbers and growing numbers of people, young kids mostly, who had become Christians, and they were very serious followers of Jesus.
But they didn't have a place to go.
Right. So we started our Christian houses. The first one was Soul Inn, 1968. It was part of a little storefront Baptist church called Lincoln Park Baptist Church. Pastor Al Gossett and his wife Letty.
So
and they let us use their room to house people.
So they just opened up some space for you to house people.
Yeah.
Great, great. How many Christian homes were there at its peak?
At the peak, they were from Sonoma, city of Sonoma, all the way down to San Jose. I don't remember how many.
But quite a few.
Quite a few. And I would travel around different times, and we'd have big baptisms. And it got to be too big for me. It was too much, and so I just pretty much relegated myself. We moved. We were living in Marin County, San Rafael. And for a while, I didn't have any place to live, and my family was living with my parents in Los Angeles. And I would live in the Anchor Rescue Mission and other places, any place I could find. And the Soul Inn was great for me because I got to live there too.
That's great. So
one time was having an opportunity to meet Carla LaVey, the daughter of Anton LaVey, the Satan, started the Church of Satan, and wrote the Satanic Bible.
Wow.
Her name was Carla, I think 15-year-old girl, and I met him and tried to witness to him. I liked to take my guitar. This was when David was gone and I was all alone. And I would take my guitar and play a little song like This Little Light of Mine and walk down the street. People would follow me. We'd go across Stanyan, over a little bit of part of the park and up into Hippie Hill. And I'd get them up into Hippie Hill. I'd get them up there, put my guitar down and preach.
Oh, wow.
And that was interesting stuff. But as things grew, my attention focused more on taking care of the Christian houses. We started Christian bookstores. It was a big responsibility to take care of all this stuff, get people discipled, keep the leaders in the houses, and starting new places. And so I did less and less on the street and more just taking care of the people who were coming to us. And they started coming in large numbers.
Wow.
And the same thing was happening. I have to mention, I know our time is running out, I have to mention Joyful Noise. We started a band. We were together a little over 3 years. One of the leading people was a lady named Mary Kay Herb. Her and her husband's bio are in the new edition of the memoirs book. She was a hooker, heroin addict on Haight Street. She'd been a high-class secretary, a beautiful woman. And I went up and started witnessing to her. Right there, she became a Christian, came home with me, went through no withdrawal symptoms. And she married a young man that came to our Bible studies. I've been in touch with him all these years. Mary Kay Herb, and she was the best preacher you ever saw. We had all ex-drug addicts and myself, and we'd get hired by school districts to go and do drug abuse assemblies. The city of Atlanta, Georgia invited us to do concerts in every high school in Atlanta. It took us 3 weeks doing 2 or 3 a day to get through all the high schools, and we went to all the colleges.
Wow.
Of course, there and back, concerts in churches and halls. And it was such an incredible outpouring of the Holy Spirit. It was really difficult when it all stopped. And in 1972, it stopped.
Meaning
like,
Joyful Noise or
the
whole movement?
No, the whole Jesus movement. It's typical of awakenings. They will have a beginning, then they'll have an ending. But you don't notice. I didn't know it was an awakening until we looked back on it many years later.
Right.
But it followed the typical pattern. It would begin, and then it would stop. And then when it stopped, you felt awful.
Oh.
Because the numbers of people weren't becoming Christians.
Mm-hmm.
The healings, a lot of healings.
Mm.
You didn't see many healings. Casting out of demons, people had been fully into all of these occult arts, transcendental meditation, Hare Krishna, on and on, where their initiations involved inviting the dead spirit of the guru into them. And then we did a lot of deliverance ministry, casting out of demons, and we saw all of that gradually fade away. The casting out of demons, though, did continue very strong into the late 70s. We were doing that full on for about 10 full years.
Wow, wow.
But that was the Jesus People movement, and then from then on, I've just continued in the ministry, pastoring churches, going through difficult times, a divorce or two, and having some real struggles. And it was very typical because we didn't know what to do with ourselves once the awakening was over. We felt like, what's going on? I've been bypassed with failures. Many of us got discouraged and went through difficult times, not untypical.
Right, right.
The more I see this, the more I see it was typical of what happened, not only to many of the leaders, but to many of the people that were involved in the ministry at the same time.
Sure, this was like high energy going on, and then suddenly it kind of stops and you just say, where am I and what just went on, right?
Exactly, yeah. Stephanie, that's what happened.
Okay, well that's incredible, Kent. Did you have something else?
I was going to say that what we've noticed over the years now, as we began to have Jesus People conferences, that many people who were converted during that period had a roller coaster life, had their ups and downs. Some people just bottomed out, but now we find a fresh flowering of these people coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, and talking about their experiences and how they met Jesus in the Jesus People movement, and continuing. It's so amazing to continue to see these people, despite sometimes major struggles, continue to follow Jesus, which are always a mark of genuine conversion.
Kent, real briefly, what are you doing now? You say you've been in the ministry for 45 years. Where are you ministering?
I'm pastor for my 31st year at the Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley. We're dually aligned with Southern Baptist and American Baptist, but we're pretty independent. We're not very Baptist-like, I suppose. We are strong, evangelical, Bible-centered, gospel-centered church. We do our ministry. This is our second television ministry. The first one is just called the Bible Study. It's been going on since 1984. We have a publishing house called Earthen Vessel Publishing. I just finished again the touch on the introduction of a book called If Allah Wills. I've been very interested in outreach to Muslims. About a year ago, God gave me a heart and a love for Muslim people.
Today, we look forward to seeing you again. Till then, God bless.